Right, I think we'll begin. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claire Fenello. I'm the Executive Director at EVCOM. We're delighted to have you all with us this afternoon for our final webinar of the year. It has been a webinar-tastic year for EVCOM. We have certainly managed to cover a lot of ground so far. This is our final for the year, but it will not be our final. We intend to carry on with webinars into next year, and we'll be releasing a program early January. But this webinar this evening is establishing a sustainable standard for events. And we are delighted to have on the panel Anna Abdelnoor from ISLA, Richard Cassar from the Ethical Tea Company, and Manuela Cadarso from Cheerful 21st. Facilitating the panel will be Sam Wilson, who will go into a bit more detail with the panel about what they do and why they're here, but that's just to let you know who will be on board. Sam Wilson is a long-term supporter of EVCOM and is also one of our business partners, and we're delighted to have her facilitate today. She is MD of Syntiro Associates, a specialist consultancy that works with creative agencies to deliver an integrated approach to sustainability, helping clients to achieve international certification, B Corp, and undertake carbon analysis to align with 1.5 degrees and target net zero. Syntiro's clients have included DRPG, Stage Struck, XL London, AEG Presents, Hearst Magazines, Havas, and M&C Saatchi, so some really big hitters there. So without further ado, I shall pass you over to Sam, and she will get the proceedings underway. Just quickly to add, if you have any questions, as usual, could we ask you to please put them in the chat box, and we will try to answer them as we go along, and any that are left we will sweep up at the end. But in the chat box, please, and we'll try and address them as we go. So thank you very much, and Sam, over to you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Claire, and a warm welcome to everybody. It would be, like Claire said, let's keep this session as interactive as possible. So please just keep that Zoom chat going. I'll weave as many in as I can, and if we can't, don't worry, we'll get to yours at the end. So the first thing I was thinking of to introduce this webinar today was something I watched recently, which really choked me up, actually. Has anyone seen the David Attenborough's new documentary, A Life on Our Planet? Just pop something in the chat if you have. Just put yes or no. Let's see some interaction this afternoon. Here's his lovely photo here. Amazing man. You can access it through Netflix. So maybe we can also, Peter's saying not yet. It's well worth it, Peter. It's well worth it. So if we can put in, yes, it's brilliant. There we go. So if we can put the link to where you can get it from Netflix into the Zoom chat, that would be really helpful if somebody could do that. And then everyone can know where to go if they want to see it. So a summary of that is he's 93 years old. And during his life on this planet, he's seen firsthand the monumental scale of humanity's impact on nature. And he actually calls it the 6th mass extinction event, which is quite something. And if we look at this next slide, we'll see why he does that. Now, if you look at this, it looks rather complicated. It's not actually. What I want you to look at here is that top right-hand quadrant where all the green triangles are. Those are the issues that are the biggest risk, and this is undertaken by the World Economic Forum. It's the 2020 Global Risk Landscape. So you can see here on this graph that impact and likelihood on that top right-hand quadrant, it's all about environmental impact and climate change. Those are the risks that we're facing. And that's as compared to things like societal risks, geopolitical risks, technological risks. So we can see here, this is the reason why everyone now has this forefront of their mind. There is no getting away from it. We must put this at the top of our agenda now. And I thank EVCOM for doing this, because this is one of the reasons we're doing this webinar. It's so we can support EVCOM. It's so we can support everyone who's here with us this afternoon to take action and get ready. So we're very lucky today to be joined by an esteemed panel. that comprise those who are doing groundbreaking work. And I know some of these people personally, and they really are spending their whole days and weekends helping the events and communications industry to gear up. So if I could please, if you could introduce yourselves now, that would be great. Anna, can I start with you?
I'm muted. Hi everybody, nice to be joined this afternoon by you all, and thanks Sam for the intro. My name's Anna Abdelnoor. I am co-founder of a new industry initiative called ISLA, which is focusing on accelerating the event industry's transition to a sustainable future. We have 12 founding member agencies after our launch in September, including Manuela, who will introduce herself, and a number of other fantastic agencies, including DRPG that Sam's worked with. And we're now up to 40 members looking at collaborating to solve some of our biggest industry challenges. We focus on education, facilitation, standardization, signposting guidance, that sort of thing. So it's been a really interesting year launching during a global pandemic, but it's as pressing as it ever was, more pressing, if anything, now that people are kind of waking up to the crises of the damage to our climate. So it's been a very challenging but very exciting year for ISLA.
Thank you so much, Anna. And if I could come to you, please, now, Manuela.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Manuela. I'm project director at Cheerful 21st, and we're a brand experience agency. Like Anna mentioned, we are one of the founding members of the ISLA initiative, and my role in the agency primarily as project director is my day-to-day job, but also I am the sustainability ambassador for the agency. And what that means is that I work closely with Anna and take part in panels like this and then pass on the information to the rest of the agency. We also have a sustainability working group in the agency, which is really great because it allows us to share ideas. How can we be more sustainable? And personally, I am really, really passionate about it because it is something that we all need to start considering really seriously. And all agencies have to come together, not just agencies, across the supply chain, which we will talk more about later. But I feel that everybody has to come together for that common goal.
Thank you, Manny, and lovely that you mentioned supply chain, because bring Richard in at this point. Richard,
I was going to say that, yeah. Supply chain part. Yeah, my name's Richard, and I run and own ethical tea company, and our job is to simply provide a service, an apparel and print service, communicating the best apparel that's already there. It's a fortunate position because there's not much work to do. The product's already there. It's just really making people aware of it and communicating why it's important to use it, and also important to communicate you're using it. So we're trying to do that. We work with organisations. I'm proud to work with big organisations like United Nations, through down to small DIY bands and sort of small to medium companies and events and festivals. Obviously, our industry has been really affected by this year as well, like everybody, but particularly the live sector. So, but it's been positive still. People I'm seeing to get a lot of feedback from people wanting to know more about sustainability. So yeah, I've seen that increase this year.
Thank you, Richard. And of course, you come from one of those environmental hotspots, don't you? Sort of the textile industry, which has numerous sort of areas, I suppose, that are incredibly important. And one of the things I loved when you spoke there was that you said you tell people why you do it. You don't just sell them the apparel. You say this is where it comes from. This is why we're doing this, and that's incredibly important, I think, if we're going to.
So when I introduce the business now, and people are asking information, well, I mean, I've worked in merchandise for 20 years, and it's not always been providing ethical merchandise. It's a realisation I've had late in my career, and we're going to get onto responsibilities in a little later. And part of that as well is that I was working for someone. So when you're working for someone, it's a lot harder to have your personal responsibilities. But when I'm creating my own business, it was something that I needed to make sure I was looking at. So yeah.
That's really inspiring. Thank you, Richard. So thinking here about misnomers around sustainability, and from my experience, people often think that sustainability is great, good to do, but it costs more. Yeah. And this even comes down to when I teach my third years. Every year I do a survey in week 1 of our semester, and every year they tick the box. It's nice, but it costs more. By the end of the course, of course, they don't tick that box. But really what we're talking about here is about efficiency. It's about the reduction of waste in all its forms, and it's also all about those cross-cutting environmental, social and economic benefits that you get from taking action, the triple bottom line, as we call it: profit, people, planet. And I'm wondering, Anna, what do you think some of the misconceptions might be around sustainability from your point of view, and what can we do as an industry to try and break down some of these misconceptions?
Oh, it's a big question.
Yeah, sorry. You can handle it, Anna.
I think one of the core misconceptions is that sustainability is a nice to have. I think a lot of people look at it and sort of say, oh, what are our sustainable options? Oh, can we afford them, or do they fit in with our current planning? And so we end up in this cycle of it never happening because it's considered a nice to have. Whereas actually, when you look at something like health and safety, which is legislated and it's mandated and it's a requirement across every project, it's not a question of whether it's nice to have, it's something that we have to do. And I think pushing that back to the people, planet, profit model, Sam, is that, you know, the health and safety element takes the people piece into that. Sustainability as a work stream, as a budgetary item within an event budget, as something that we need to be focusing on, would tick that planet box as well. And it's not about box ticking, but it's about showing that mandate for it. So I think the idea that it's nice to have is quite a common misconception. Actually, it's critical that we have sustainability as part of our work streams across our events. I mean, I could go on and tell you some other misconceptions, but I don't want to hog the floor. So I think just in terms of that point, what can we do? I think it's about planning sustainability, and right at the beginning of the project, when you have your kickoff meeting, I think that's one of the easiest things that you could possibly do is have a 30-minute sustainability meeting, considering it as a mandatory rather than nice to have, as a key action element.
Yeah, so integrating it in, Anna, so it becomes a part of. And maybe even, like I know some of our clients, put it on the budget line and it's an opt-out for the clients. It's in there. And
it doesn't feel so good to opt out, does it?
No.
It feels a bit uncomfortable. So
Yeah, love that.
Exactly, Anna, exactly. And they don't. And this is the thing. So I think it's also about us educating clients, isn't it? Manny, what are your thoughts around that from an agency point of view?
Yeah, I do. I agree with Anna. I think the easiest thing is to implement that at the beginning, but also something that we have also been working with Anna and learning about how we can, as an agency, inform our clients. So, for example, you know, giving them the option will actually, it doesn't, we've got capacity to influence the client on the decisions that they make. So it's about understanding what sections of the event have we got influence on, what sections don't we, and then what other sections could we potentially look at alternatives. So things like travel, sometimes you can't avoid people traveling to a destination. So that would be one that you might not have as much influence on, but actually on the ground travel, you can influence the client on how they're getting delegates from the airport to the venue, etc. when we go back to real life meetings and events. But for us also, I think I would say that usually clients would think on the whole that, particularly in high end and luxury, that sustainability doesn't translate to high end and luxury, that, you know, you can't do certain things if it's that you want to be high end, sorry, but isn't sustainable. So I think it's about understanding there is so much option, and I think Richard would agree that there are so many suppliers now that are sustainable and that are providing those alternatives, and you can do luxury events and incentives and be sustainable, and do simple meetings and be sustainable. So I think the options available to us now are getting bigger and bigger, and actually there are different cost price points as well, so it doesn't all have to be expensive. I think it's just from an agency perspective, there's a bit more work that has to be done at the beginning, and doing a bit more research and planning. But once you've done that, if you do it at the beginning, it's easy to continue as we move through. So yeah, I would say.
And of course, the lovely thing is most of the clients that we work for are from one of those large companies which now have to report
Absolutely.
on their environmental social governance. So you can find their report online, and then you can use that to weave in lots of sort of ROI opportunities, if you like, in terms of where you've been able to bolster and support their corporate sustainability agenda, which is a lovely thing to be able to do if that's brought in, as Anna said, right at the beginning. From tender to pitch to kick off, if it's woven into that. Richard, you've got a slightly, I would say, a slightly different viewpoint there, because we've been talking a lot about environmental impact so far, but you come from an environmental, yes, but also another point of view there. Can you share that with us?
Well, the sustainability is sort of like on a workers side as well. You know, the sustainability of working life for especially in areas that are outside of our immediate society as well. The cotton industry is one of the most devastating industries to the planet. And when you were just talking about, you know, writing in the small things like on CO2 from a standard men's large white t-shirt, to use that as a comparison for like, you're using about 2,700 litres of water per t-shirt, and when that water is not coming from a naturally replenished resource, the irrigation that causes, the water diversion causes huge problems. Some of the biggest environmental disasters, for example, you've got the Aral Sea in Uzbekistan. I sent a link over, I think it may be available somewhere, is back in the 60s and 70s, it was the 4th largest lake, and within 40 years it's now a desert. And so it has a huge impact on a carbon footprint level. There's 7 kilos of CO2 generated per t-shirt, whereas with the t-shirt we supply, and this is where the simple choices you can make, has got 700 grams of CO2. So you've got roughly about 6 kilos a t-shirt. So if you've got an event and you're using 500 t-shirts for delegates, and you choose to use just a simple choice of this t-shirt or that t-shirt, you're saving 3 tons of CO2 on your event. And so that's for us, that's the small choices we want to make sure people are aware of, that they're paying for when they're not using a conscious choice. You are paying for the opposite, you know. And right now there's not much difference between the cost of the t-shirt, so they're cost comparative, and actually a better garment as well. So yeah, there's much more than just the environment. Of course, the environment's huge, and there are massive impacts of the non-organic cotton industry on that, but it's also for workers' rights, because some of the most abused workers in the world come in the garment industry, and there's a lot of greenwashing. There's audit companies that have got brilliant certifications, and the consistent and persistent reports coming out of those places of workers' abuses, you know. So you need to be careful, and need to be sort of trying to do a bit of research, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of say, hey, look at this link, look at that link. These are the kind of people that are using these t-shirts, just to give you a very easy consumer choice when you're making your choices.
This is a really great idea, Richard, that you're bringing up here. And it's one of the things that struck me. We have to be so careful where we're investing our money, don't we? We have to be so careful what we're buying. And you can look at your dripping tap, but if you do that and you're not thinking about what's in your supply chain in terms of what you've just shared in terms of those environmental impacts, you're missing the elephant in the room. So it's so important, isn't it, to hotspot what are those biggest impacts, and of course where you can make the biggest influence when you're an agency is you can choose what to buy.
And I'm sure the others would agree with that. I mean, this is just my area, which is apparel, and that's it. And I'm sure these kind of choices, some choices can have even bigger impacts, and some smaller, but it's all a similar choice. if we can be presented as people that run events with some simple to make choices, then I think most people will make them, and especially if they're elicited correctly as well with the information behind it.
So where does the responsibility lie? Anna, do you want to come in there and talk a bit more about that?
Sure. I think just before I do, to allude to the previous point that Richard was making, is that actually there's a huge resource within our supply chains. You know, supply chains exist because they provide services and expertise and knowledge that we buy. And so being able to bring our suppliers into the conversation a lot sooner when we're, as you know, as agencies or as event owners or brands, actually, you know, the benefit of that on our events is massive. You know, if you were able to kind of bring Richard in, for example, right at the beginning, you know you're going to produce merchandising, then you have a much clearer idea about the impact of that merchandising, how they can respond, how they can support you with your sustainability aims and so on, because, you know, they're experts and we turn to them for a reason, because they have knowledge that we don't. So I think that's just a really, you know, to push that out there as a message, I think is a really powerful to lean on our supply chain.
Yeah.
But I think that also kind of leads into the responsibility question, that it's everybody's responsibility. I think maybe that's one of the other big misnomers, is that it's somebody else's problem to deal with. I think a lot of the time we are all across the chain, whether we're kind of full end suppliers, whether we're a venue or an agency, throughout that chain, it's always pushed back to the end client, that it's dictated by the client, and so we don't have any responsibility. It's not our money and it's not our choice. And I think actually, if we can lead the change from the other way, from the bottom of the supply chain, you know, and also from brands top down, which is what they're doing, they're asking for sustainable, then actually we can collectively engage to look at those core problems and problem solve them. So it's everybody's responsibility. It's no single individual or no single business's responsibility to solve this problem. We have to do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's not, no longer can we say, we'll just leave it to this person, or we can't do it because of that person. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts upon that, Manu?
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, to Anna's point about the responsibility and where that lies, often as an agency, when you're planning an event, there will be last minute things that you need to buy, or, you know, the last minute panic set pieces or whatever it is, and you run to IKEA, or you buy off Amazon, and we've all done it. I'm guilty of it, and it's kind of like a safety net that we've all gotten used to, that, you know, you need something last minute, right, I'll order it online and that's it. And I think to put the responsibility on us and lean more on our supply chain, that piece of work has to be done as an agency, I guess, and really build a robust network of suppliers, and, you know, work with people like Richard and have them on board, even if you're not using them for a particular event, but at least you have that network and you know where to go to make those more conscious choices, rather than just the last minute the client says, I need 100 t-shirts. Okay, the first thing you'll do is just Google, find whatever pops up first, and because it's such a short turnaround, you'll go ahead and just order the most well, I would say the most cost effective, but also the easiest and the person who can ship the fastest, etc. So I think it's just about planning, and it is, like I said earlier, it's a little bit more effort at the beginning, but once you kind of get into that motion and way of working, then it should hopefully, you know, work out.
And I think, sorry, just to jump in there, but to what you're saying, Manuela, about we have these last minute requests, and we do, and that, you know, it's the bugbear of an event producer's life, the last minute requests and snags on site. But I think one of the key things that we can be doing, and it's not always easy to do it in these situations, but is questioning the need. You know, actually, clients have their own event stakeholders. You know, they are the event teams that deliver this for stakeholders, and so they are in a similar way beholden to what their end user and or event owner or brand owner is asking for. But there is this question of saying, that's fine, we can facilitate the need, but do we need it? Is there an alternative solution that doesn't have the same impacts as buying 100 t-shirts that we probably don't need anyway because we're not going to run out? Or, you know, actually, can we pass them out at the end of the event rather than the beginning of the event, which gives us a longer lead time to use one of our more trusted suppliers, etc. So it's really around pushing that question of, yes, we can facilitate, can we do it in a different way that has less impact? And again, not necessarily as easy to do that and practice it in the moment, but if we can start trying to do that practice, it becomes more commonplace. And we're pushing that back onto our event owners as well, to sort of say, hey, have you asked yourself this question? Which is quite powerful, I think, when you actually stop and take a step back.
I love that thought, Anna. Thank you for sharing that. And the whole idea, and I've worked with a number of event companies over the year, and we've had to frame, when a client has said something, we would like to bring twice as much stock as we need to this show. We've had to then go back and explain the impacts that would be caused as a result of that. There's triple bottom line impacts, economic as well, that would be caused as a result of that. Then frame it within their corporate sustainability agenda. And I've actually seen the most amazing conversations with clients take place after that kind of that opportunity to discuss that has been opened up. And I think that's very much around the agency to bring that to those meaningful conversations to their client communications, and then in the context of corporate sustainability and those triple bottom line impacts, and why it really would not be a good idea. I've seen that had tremendous results, actually, long-term results. Thank you, everybody. And of course, we've got drivers for change. Consumers are now, aren't they? Consumers are voting with their pound. They are voting with who they work for. They are seeing themselves as investors. When they buy something, they're thinking of themselves as investors. So there we've got another a driver for change amongst all the others that we've just spoken about. One of the reasons I work in the creative industry is because of our unique power to be agents of change. We're different. We sit in a very different place, I think, to other industries. And I firmly believe that we are pivotal to the challenge of not just climate change, but also the other impacts that Richard has mentioned today, in terms of how we, if you like, quite simply, how we normalise all of these socially and environmentally responsible behaviours as an integral part of our campaigns and events. I was watching a film the other day, and they had lots of disposable coffee cups. And it's such an easy thing to be able to do when you're developing a creative comms campaign, is just to make sure that you don't have any of those on camera. You know, that you're thinking all the time about how do I normalise sustainable behaviours across the social and environmental responsible spectrum.
I was thinking a similar thing to the other day. I was actually watching the snooker, and there's a water company who's obviously paid for the snooker players to drink their water at the side, and they're all drinking from plastic bottles. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why do you have it in a glass bottle? Yeah. And they pour it into a glass. You know, it's like, I mean, just even if that was just from a PR perception point of view, but it's just baffling sometimes that people.
Yeah, it's shocking.
Blind to it.
And I think, you know, I would go so far as to say we do have a responsibility to ensure that the message that we give out is a responsible one. Yeah, I agree with you, Richard. Anna or Manuela, do you have any? Anna, do you want to go first? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Dog's a piece of string.
Yeah, I know.
In terms of kind of how we can, from a communications perspective, how we can lead from the front with that change.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. Yes. You know, I think we have so much power in the communications industry, whether that's through print media, digital media, to be those agents of change. And I think when we look at kind of influencer markets and how people are using their influential statuses to sell products and so on, actually we have opportunities to be really creative as the people who are kind of well, not us as event producers types, but you know, those brands and the communication piece, to sort of say, let's look at how we can be more responsible, how we can be more conscious. I mean, the millennial and Gen Z spending power is slowly growing into the biggest spending power globally, and so many from Gen Z are looking to invest in the more environmentally conscious brands, as you've identified, Sam. What's really difficult, I think, for brands, and are often quite prohibitive to really being agents of change and pushing positive communications, is the fear of greenwashing. And it's real. Greenwashing is real. So real. But yeah, there's a fear that if you take a stance, I think if you take a stance as a brand on climate positivity, that if your whole operation or your whole chain, your value chains aren't also entirely sustainable, then you get accused of greenwashing. So it can sometimes be a lot easier to hold back from that and not take that path. But I think as creative communications industries, we don't have to be saying, hey, we're all singing, all dancing perfect. It's about encouraging and promoting our consumers, our investors, our own brand, you know, our internal and external, our full reach, about incentivizing and motivating to be better. It's an education piece. It's not, I don't think brands, and I don't think us as communications industry have to create these campaigns that tell people how wonderful everything is all the time. People know that that's not true and know that there has to be big shifts for change. So I think there's an opportunity for us to lead through positive example without having to say that we are doing everything within our power. I think we have to be honest and transparent, and those kinds of conversations that engage people are really powerful, and they're what people want to know. They want to be able to be part of a solution, and I think that's a really critical thing, and that's something that we can be doing with our sustainable communications campaigns.
You know, I really agree, and I think we've got to use that word greenwash very, very carefully, because someone can have all the best intentions and it not work out. And if it doesn't work out, fine, just be honest that we tried this and it didn't work out. And we're never ever going to achieve perfect sustainability. It's a journey that we're all on. So I'm not a great fan of pointing the finger at somebody if they're not perfect. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's all about supporting each other on this journey and working in partnership. How have you found clients, Manuela, in terms of, are they receptive in terms of the ideas that you bring to the table in terms of sustainability and perhaps normalising those behaviours as part of the experiential campaign?
Absolutely. I think definitely in the last year, certainly a couple of years to a year, we've been actively having those conversations, and like Anna said, pushing back a little bit more and questioning things a little bit more, and actually going in the first place with more sustainable options when it comes to any part of the event. I think usually it's welcome. And actually what we found that it's currently a tier 1 priority for a lot of the clients that we're working with, and sustainability across the board, like you said, the documentaries available, all the information, it all points to one thing: everybody has to make it a tier 1 priority. So actually our jobs in the sense of talking to clients about sustainability, we've been on the same page. We haven't really come across a particular client that has said, no, I don't want to do it. I think there's more that we can do, and obviously as an agency we're not perfect, but it is on our agenda, it is important, and we are taking steps to become more sustainable and ethically sourcing responsibly, all of that, which is part of our ethos and what we want to do. And I think that then translates when we do pitches, when we do proposals and presentations to clients, that comes across. So it's working with them, but it's already a priority for a lot of our clients, which is really, really great to see.
That's great news. That's great news. I have a question from the audience. Is there a point at which agencies wouldn't work with a client who doesn't want to invest in a sustainable output? So do you think we're going to come to a point where an agency would say, no, I'm not going to work with you because you're associated with a carbon heavy industry? Gosh, that's a big question.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel comfortable answering that, especially in the current climate. I think that aside, it's down for us as an agency. If we really believe and want to carry out sustainable practice, and we talk about it, the proposals, our pitches, our proposals, what we go at with the client suggestions would all be sustainable. In an ideal world, our proposal to them would be sustainable, and they either take it or leave it, and that's the way we're working, because ultimately we've got the responsibility and we're working with our suppliers. So we can say no to a supplier. In terms of saying no to a client from an unsustainable, it's above my pay grade, Sam. So
it is that big question, isn't it? But it's being asked out there. Yeah. And one of the things that we're helping clients with is, mindful association.
Yeah.
So sort of, you know, considering those associations, where might the risks be? Where might the opportunities be? How might they be managed for the greater good, rather than it being a categorical yes or no? I don't think it's that simple, if I'm honest with you. But thank you for being, you know, for going at least some of the way towards that answer. And I love your standpoint.
On a supplier's point of view,
please, Richard.
Sorry, on a supplier's point of view, we've said no to clients that want to use come to us with merchandise that we won't supply. But as someone said about being flexible earlier, is that if we've got clients that we're educating on their merchandise, and 95% of it is available through the sources that we have, and there's a small one that's just not available in a colour or size or product that's not from our supply, then we would supply it, because it means that we have them as a client and we can educate on that. But if someone comes to us and says, no, I want to use these and these only, then we kindly sort of decline to work with them, because it's not what we do. I suppose it's slightly different from being an agent, though.
I think that's a great example, though, Richard. I really do. It's a great example of where you've really considered it and said, on this occasion we can do this because, and on this occasion no. And maybe it's important for us in this level, we're talking about responsibility and accountability, to say no on occasions. Maybe that is taking responsibility.
I think there's a degree of agility that we need to look at as our industry. I mean, I think everything that the COVID-19 impact has shown us is that whilst we can pivot to digital, which is what, you know, we have done as an industry, actually it has been it's been terrible. You know, the impact of the pandemic has been really terrible on our industry, and I think to a degree of that is you know, the fact that we are a live events industry, but I think globally across the world, we've seen that there's sort of a lack of agility and adaptability. And I think in terms of being able to address that, wouldn't we work with a client? I think there does need to be a degree of agility and adaptability in how you assess this. And I think exactly like Richard and the way you summarised that, Sam, about looking at the opportunities to do things differently and engage clients differently. But it's, and I think from your side, Manny, it's about, you know, being able to assess the values of that brand against your organization. I think it's very easy to say, no, we wouldn't work with this kind of brand or that kind of brand because they're sustainable, or not easy, as the case may be. But being able to align that to your values, and how does that tie in as an agency? What's our purpose? What do we want to deliver? And the same for Richard, what do you want to do and how do you want to deliver it? It works in the same way, and there's that adaptability to address some of that in the way that we approach those difficult conversations. Yeah, I think. I
do hope there's some red lines for people, though, because I mean, for one, I'm hoping everybody wouldn't work with the Conservative Party as a brand. I mean, that's a bit too far, isn't it? No.
I'm not, Richard, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I thought you're
I love that you have, though.
We haven't got too long, actually, but what a fantastic conversation it's been this afternoon. Anna, I do want to go to you now. Now, you and I met over a coffee over a year ago now, in Brighton, where we both live. And we talked about what we both do. And we came to the conclusion really rather quite quickly that we want to work wherever possible in collaboration over competition. And I'm really delighted to say that we've just let it happen, and over the last year we've found areas where we can really support one another. So perhaps the international standards that we help people with, it's a wider framework, but within that sits all these wonderful actions and measurements that ISLA is also focusing on. Why do you think it's so important to have this unified approach for event sustainability?
I think the key thing is so that everybody is speaking a common language. Sustainability is such a complex topic, because I think when we talk about it from the top level, a lot of people look at it from an environmental perspective. But when you break down into environment, you're talking about biodiversity, water, soil erosions, impact on seas, ice melting. There's so many different elements. And then when you bring it through into the kind of the social constructs as well, inequality, injustice, education, you know, all of those different pieces, it's such a difficult subject. So having a unified standard, having one common voice, one place that we're working from as an industry, is going to help us create the transitions, create the momentum and movement that we need to align ourselves with global, global initiatives to limit our emissions, to tie in with local and national governmental initiatives, to push that onto the international stage, and so on. So, if we're all trying to kind of fight for the right foot forward, then actually we're also inhibiting each other. So that unified strategy, that unified approach, speaking from a common place, gives us a playing field from which we can jump from, and which we're all playing a level place with an agreed baseline agenda, as it were. So I think for us, that's really what's so important, and what ISLA wants to try and do. But it's that unification and collaboration as well. And I think that's where a lot of the work that we're doing together, Sam, comes into it, is about how do we take the resources, take the knowledge, share that, make it a collaborative piece that everybody can buy into. Because again, it comes down to that agency to engage and drive that change together and feel empowered.
Yes, and we can either spend our energies fighting one another and trying to get one-upmanship, or we can spend our energies pulling together and making this change that we need to happen. We have a choice, don't we? And I love that collaboration over competition. I love that ISLA stands for that, as do we. So, right. Well, I'm going to hand over to Claire in a minute. I think what I would like to say is, one of the things is really important is take time to have those meaningful conversations. Take time to decide where you want to go, how you want to get there. And please, please bear in mind that each of us here, Anna, Manuela, Richard, me, Claire, coordinator, who's the lovely Amelia, who you can't see here, but she is here. We're all here to help you do that, to help you on your journey, no matter where it is you want to go. So do reach out to EVCOM, do reach out to us and ask any questions that might fall out of either your meaningful conversations that you take forward or this webinar.
Thanks ever so much, Sam. And interestingly, just as you were wrapping up there, a comment came in from Hillary, suggesting that EVCOM members pledge to drive sustainable initiatives forward, and if they achieve ESGs, they are awarded a mark. Now, this is really interesting. So, Hillary, perhaps you and I could enter into an email conversation, because I would be happy to explore that, because I think that's an interesting way forward, because what EVCOM is always trying to do is find a way to drive things forward, so that we're not just sort of a vessel, if you see what I mean, so that we want to be able to move things forward. And what I particularly liked, which came up in that very last section of the conversation, was about collaboration. And I think one thing that this last year has really proven is that for a highly competitive sector, we have certainly all found a way to collaborate. And I think that's been remarkable. There's been lots of joint initiatives, people working together, trying to help each other out. And if one good thing comes out of all of this messy mess, hopefully will be that realization that there's competition and there is working together towards creating an ideal that everybody can buy into. And I think that is absolutely something that EVCOM can get behind. So delighted to take suggestions and ideas as to how we go about doing that. And I see a response from Hillary that she's happy to engage, so that's great. But on that note, I found it fascinating, and Richard, yay, go with saying no. I'm very impressed. Thank you all for taking part, Anna, Richard and Manuela for our wonderful panel, and Sam for our very uber prepared facilitator. Thank you so much. And if I don't see you all or speak to you all in the next week or so, have a wonderful Christmas. And I, for one, will be eating and drinking my body weight over the next few weeks. And if you see you next week, I'll be a different shape. Thank you all for joining us, and goodbye, and see you all in the new year. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.